Welcome, everyone. I'm George Kendall, Editor-in-Chief and Publisher for Booklist, published by the American Library Association. Thank you for joining us to celebrate this joyous presentation of the 2021 Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence in Fiction and Nonfiction. We wish we could all be together in person, but we're thrilled to have so very many of you from all across the country here with us today in the virtual realm. It's been exciting to follow the work of this year's dedicated Carnegie Selection Committee made up of Booklist and RUSA members at each stage of their deliberations and announcements. I want to thank them for their thoughtful work. It was gratifying to read reviews in each new issue of Booklist and wonder which titles might make it onto the Carnegie lists. You will have received the digital program for today's event, which you can see here prior to the start of the program. Please use the link to download the program so you can view it throughout the presentation. It is my honor to set in motion this tribute to outstanding books and authors, to reading, library workers, and the art of reader's advisory. We have a truly remarkable lineup of speakers today, beginning with ALA's Executive Director, Tracy D. Hall. Thank you so much, Tracy, for joining this celebration.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and hello everyone. It's really an honor to be speaking here today about Dr. Vartan Gregorian. I really want to dedicate my remarks to remembering his legacy. It feels so fitting that I do that. Vartan was president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York at the time of his passing. And especially, I want to call out that it was Carnegie support that has made these medals come into existence and are now among the most prestigious awards given to adult fiction and nonfiction writing. I am not sure if a lot of people know this, but the Carnegie funds that support the medals came from what is called the President's Fund, which meant that Dr. Gregorian personally selected these awards to support. Having come from a foundation background myself, as well as a librarianship background, I can tell you that the competition for those resources is fierce. And the fact that Dr. Gregorian himself held these awards in such regard really speaks to the value and prestige. Throughout my early career as a librarian, Vartan Gregorian was a constant presence. He was often mentioned as one of the legends of the profession. His story of going from his childhood in Tabriz, raised mostly by his grandparents, to serve as a University of Pennsylvania's provost, as president of the New York Public Library, as president of Brown University, and to becoming a recipient of both the National Humanities Medal and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. All of that meant so much to me as a librarian raised in South Central Los Angeles, also mostly by her grandparents, whose higher education eventually led her to this field. Dr. Gregorian was one of those truly rare individuals whose intelligence, charisma, integrity, and kindness made you feel as though you were in the presence of a giant. And you were. Vartan was so remarkably gifted. He changed everything he touched, and the library field bears his indelible mark. Dr. Gregorian often spoke about the importance of libraries in his own life. He spoke of his early work as a page in a local American library, saying that experience had changed his life. And he repaid his gratitude again and again in his extraordinary leadership at the New York Public Library and at the helm of the Carnegie Corporation. Vartan once said, "In our democratic society, the library stands for hope, for learning, for progress, for literacy, for self-improvement, and for civic engagement. The library is a symbol of opportunity, citizenship, equality, freedom of speech, and freedom of thought, and hence is a symbol for democracy itself. And he truly believed those words. When I finally had the honor of meeting him, soon after I was named executive director of the American Library Association, it was for me really tantamount to meeting someone larger than life. What I never told anyone is that before embarking on librarianship, I had imagined for myself a career in policy. And while in and just after grad school in New Haven, I had spent my early 20s applying for almost every job the Carnegie Corporation posted to no avail. So meeting Vartan was destined. And in a way, I was also seeking his validation. I remember him ending one of our conversations, mostly really his advisement on the import of ALA as an organization and how I, its new leader, should be positioning it for greater visibility and support. He ended that conversation with this advice: when you talk to people, keep your head up. People may try to put you in a box, but don't let them. Never let anyone put you in a box. I can't help but feel that there are so many conversations still to be had with Vartan, so many ideas still to share. Ideas like this one, when he said, the existence and the welfare of the library are of paramount importance in the life of a society, in the life of a community, in the life of a university, the life of a school, of a college, the life of a city, the life of a nation. But libraries are more than repositories of past human endeavor. They are instruments of civilization. They are a laboratory of human aspiration, a window to the future, and a wellspring of action. We at the American Library Association are so honored to have known Dr. Gregorian, and it was a privilege, and it is a privilege to do the work that carries forward his dream of building a more equitable and more just world through libraries. In Dr. Gregorian's honor and in his memory, I want to thank all who are gathered here. And I want to acknowledge all who will be recognized. Thank you for refusing to let anyone put you or your ideas in a box.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm Courtney McDonald, RUSA president, and it's my delight and honor to represent RUSA as we celebrate the 2021 Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence in Fiction and Nonfiction. RUSA is home to many exciting book and media awards and best of lists for adults, including notable books, the reading list, the listening list, the codes list, and the Sophie Brody Medal. The year's best in fiction, nonfiction, poetry, audiobook narration, reference materials, and more are handpicked by our expert selection committees that work closely with adult readers. Their tireless efforts narrow down hundreds of finalists to curate the highly regarded best of lists used by librarians, publishers, and booksellers nationwide. The Carnegies, as we like to call them, are announced each year at the Book and Media Awards at ALA's Midwinter. We then honor the Carnegie Medal winners at ALA Annual. These award programs have included such keynote speakers as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Sarah Paretsky, and Laura Lippman. Past Carnegie Medal winners include, for fiction, Colson Whitehead and Viet Thanh Nguyen, and for nonfiction, Brian Stevenson and Kesey Lehman. The Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence Selection Committee includes RUSA members, Booklist staff and reviewers, and an independent bookseller from across the country. I want to thank this year's committee for their diligent, passionate, and expert work. The committee considers hundreds of adult works of fiction and nonfiction to arrive at their fall long list of 45 titles, give or take a few. This annual long list is an invaluable resource for Readers Advisory and book groups and for library programming. The short list, 6 fiction titles and 6 nonfiction titles, follows, another opportunity for recommendations. Providing guidance and inspiration for adult readers is a pleasurable and demanding aspect of our work, and the Carnegies are a tremendous inspiration. On behalf of RUSA, I applaud the 2021 Carnegie Medal for Excellence winners, Rebecca Giggs and James McBride, and express our gratitude to today's exceptional keynote speaker, novelist and journalist Thrity Umrigar. It is now my privilege to introduce the next speaker, Danielle Baraski, novelist vice president. Danielle, thank you for your generous and eloquent support of the Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence in Fiction and Nonfiction, and for help making this wonderful event possible.
Thanks, Courtney. I'm really delighted to be here today. So we're here to celebrate some of the best books of the year chosen by the 2021 Carnegie Medals Committee. And Novelist is delighted to sponsor this event once again, because it's an opportunity to highlight the special role that books have in providing us with deeper connections to each other. I'd like to offer just a few brief thoughts on how books and the stories within them matter to our lives more than we might realize. There's a phrase I've been hearing people use a lot recently. It has to do with the ever expanding services that are offered by libraries. Everything from maker spaces to coding classes to career assistance. And what people say is this: libraries are now about more than just books. That sentence makes me a little bit uncomfortable. It's true, libraries are now about more than just books, but every time I hear it, what I actually hear is the just. I hear that books aren't really that important. And then in my mind, I think, I guess the other stuff that the library is doing is more exciting than the books. And it really, in my mind, shrinks the value of books to something that is bordering on becoming irrelevant. And that shrinking away from books, I think, is a little bit misguided. Like most of you here today, I love books. And I think an organization like the library that is dedicated to reading is one of the best ideas that we humans have come up with. I think Tracy articulated it very nicely in her opening remarks. I think that books and libraries can do these amazing things for us. Books are these little packages of opportunity, and it might seem like a reader is just enjoying stories when they're reading, but in reality, they're opening themselves up to new ideas. They're seeing the world through new lenses. They're being exposed to new ways of understanding their fellow human beings. And to me, that's the complete opposite of something that is irrelevant. It's powerful, it's full of potential. So what I wish we could do, instead of saying that libraries are about more than just books, is shift a little bit and put those books right at the center of what libraries offer. Because pretty much everything that libraries do can be strengthened by the addition of books. And I'll just offer a few examples. In every makerspace, we need books that spark creativity because we need to inspire those people who are good at imagining new solutions to problems. In every Learn to Code class, we need biographies of scientists who change the world because we need to support people who think deeply about the impact they can have for the better on our society. And in our social gathering spaces in the library, it's the perfect opportunity to bring people together around books, because those books are a great way for us to share windows into others' experiences, helping us all to learn and grow and learn how to be together. So I hope that we can stop saying that libraries are more than just books. Of course they are, they always have been. But the existence of those other services doesn't mean that books are any less important. And in fact, I think it's just the opposite. So I hope that we can instead talk about how much more libraries are able to do because of the books in their collections. They build on that strong foundation of books. They add in programs and services. They add in physical spaces for people to come together. And the end result is a place that is still about books, but maybe even better because of all those extra things added in. I mentioned earlier that I'm here on behalf of Novelists. Novelists is an organization that is dedicated to the idea that books and stories can change lives. And we are so grateful to the authors that are represented here today for writing stories that provide us with deeper understanding and connection to each other. And we thank the librarians in the audience for connecting those books to the readers who need them. Thank you. And now we'll hear from Bill Kelly, Chair of the 2021 Carnegie Medal Selection Committee.
Thank you, Danielle, for your inspiring speech. And thank you, George, Tracy, and Courtney for joining us. We have a wonderful keynote speaker ahead, and then we will hear from both our Carnegie Medal for Excellence winners, Rebecca Giggs for nonfiction and James McBride for fiction. It has been an incredible honor to serve as chair of the 2021 Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence Selection Committee. I want to thank everyone on the committee, inspired librarians and reviewers representing RUSA and Booklist, and an independent bookseller for their ardent and expert work nominating and evaluating dozens and dozens of nonfiction and fiction titles. I send gratitude and congratulations to these brilliant and devoted readers and readers' advisors. Alicia K. Alvers, Terry Hong, Bill Ott, Nancy Pearl, Javier Ramirez, and Donna Seaman. We are so very fortunate to have novelist and journalist Thrity Umrigar as this year's Carnegie Medal keynote speaker to celebrate the Carnegies, the power of books, and the importance of libraries. Thrity Umrigar is the best-selling author of The Weight of Heaven, The World We Found, The Story Hour, Everybody's Son, and The Secrets Between Us. Her new novel, Honor, will be published in January 2022. Thrity's books have been chosen for Community Reads, and she is the winner of the Cleveland Arts Prize, a Lamba Literary Award, and the Seth Rosenberg Prize. She is also the recipient of a Nieman Fellowship to Harvard. Her articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe. Thrity is a distinguished university professor of English at Case Western Reserve University here in Cleveland. Booklist has praised Thrity's fiction as, quote, eloquent and evocative, bitter and sweet. Thank you so much for joining us today, Thrity.
Thrity, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, take two. Bill, thank you for that generous introduction, and thank you to all of you for inviting me to deliver this year's keynote. I am humbled and excited to be here today. I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about my own early experiences with libraries. I got my first library membership card when I was about 7 years old. Although, to be honest with you, to call it a library is a bit of a stretch, especially to all of you who grew up taking free public libraries for granted. The small circulating library that I am describing held a finite amount of pulp fiction, film magazines, American comic books, romances, and just a few literary novels, all crammed together in a strip of space on a busy street in Bombay, India. The owner of this shop or library was Jaffer, a kindly middle-aged man who sat at the front of this store and entered every book that we checked out into an enormous red ledger. Yes, boys and girls, once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, you didn't just scan books at the checkout. It was my aunt who took me to get my first monthly membership, a gift for my birthday. I remember my head bobbing with pride as we walked home, feeling as if I had taken my first tentative steps toward adulthood. That card, I believed, would unlock the mysteries of the world to me. What I didn't know then was that it would unlock the world itself and help me find my place in it. It is easy now, living in a city that has two of the finest library systems in the country, the Cleveland Public Library and the Cuyahoga County Public Library, to think back with bemusement about that humble circulating library where I read my first real books, adventure stories about the Secret Seven and the Famous Five, all written by the beloved British author Enid Blyton. But I know this for a fact. Without that little for-profit library, I would have never become a writer. You see, I read Jaffer's entire inventory of Enid Blyton books. The monthly membership allowed you to keep a book for 4 days, but I was a fast reader and finished those novels within hours. During summer holidays, I often went with my father to his factory to spend the day there. On our way there, we'd stop long enough for me to pick up my daily novel. By lunchtime, I would have finished reading the book, and often on our way home, I'd ask Dad to stop by the library again. I'd look Jaffer right in the eye and lie to his face, telling him that I checked out a book I'd already read and that I needed to exchange it for another. He was a good soul. He played along. Poker-faced, he'd ask me to choose the second book of the day. They say it takes about 10,000 hours of practice to master a craft. While I'd never claimed to master the art of writing, I can tell you that reading those books to the point where I could quote entire passages by heart taught me some of my earliest lessons in craft, lessons that I imbibed that shaped my bones and that became part of my DNA. Those books took a lonely, introspective child out of a hot, chaotic city and transported her into the English countryside, into a land of midnight snacks and picnics and adventures and camaraderie. It was my first lesson in the power of imagination. Indeed, my career as a writer was made possible because of the existence of a library in a sliver of space, started by a man who himself probably had a high school education. Jaffer also gave me my first affirmation and conception of myself as a devoted and serious reader, praising me to my father for having graduated to reading Mad Magazine while my peers were still reading, Archie and Veronica comic books. At age 21, I came to The Ohio State University to get a grad degree in journalism. During my first week of classes, I went to the university library, so big that it could have fitted 1,000 of Jaffer's circulating libraries inside it, and timidly approached the librarian. "Excuse me," I said, "can you tell me how many books I can check out at one time?" She shrugged. "As many as you can carry, honey," she said. I suspected then that she was messing with me. "How long can I keep a book?" I asked. "For as long as you wish," she said. I decided to call her bluff. "What if I wanted to keep the books for the whole semester?" I asked. She smiled. "Then you do." I had thought that I was coming to Ohio, but I knew then that I had accidentally stumbled upon heaven. Later that week, I was telling a classmate about this magical experience. She listened, and then she told me about Andrew Carnegie and the libraries that he'd built across America. Then she said something that, at that time, sounded so fantastical, so American in its wild optimism that I've never forgotten her words. She said that her father always claimed that in America, there was no reason for a person to be uneducated because they could always access any book they wanted from the public library. Many years have gone by since she said this. We are all older and perhaps less optimistic than we were then. And I now know all the counter arguments to that simplistic sentiment. We better understand the role that geography and biology and race and class and gender play in our lives and in the education system. I now recognize the elitism, the affluent white male privilege behind those words. After all, what good is a library to a person who, through no fault of their own, reads at a 5th grade or a 3rd grade level? And yet there was something so quintessentially American in the hopefulness of those words. Public libraries truly are temples of democracy. All are welcome, immigrant and native born, Black, brown, yellow, and white. And as our lives have changed and grown, so have our libraries. Let others bemoan the fact that there's no longer a stereotypical elderly white lady librarian shushing us when we raise our voices at the local library. I love the fact that in their latest incarnation, libraries are a hub of the community, egalitarian in their use to those they serve. The retired academic checking out the latest books by James McBride and Rebecca Giggs, the unemployed steelworker needing help with a new resume, the gangly teenager writing his first cover letter to a poetry journal for a poem he's submitting. You want to see Blue America and Red America together? Go visit your public library. You know, I've often thought that the sad things about humans is that we get so used to things around us that the miraculous becomes commonplace and overlooked. And so I'm thankful that I grew up in a country without a network of free public libraries. It makes me value what I have in my backyard today, and it is nothing that I will ever take for granted. So here's to libraries, and here's to books that hold both the mysteries of the universe and the keys to those mysteries. Here's to writers and librarians, and here's to readers. Literature is a dance that writers do with multiple partners, and libraries are the music that make that dance possible. Congrats to this year's winners, James McBride and Rebecca Giggs, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to join in the celebration of their marvelous books. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Thrity, for that beautiful and moving speech. It is now time to honor the 2021 Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence finalists and the 2 winners, one for nonfiction, the other for fiction. Let's begin with the 2 nonfiction finalists. Just Us, An American Conversation by Claudia Rankin, Grey Wolf Press. With a blend of essays and images perfectly attuned to this long overdue moment of racial reckoning, Rankin analyzes the overwhelming power of whiteness in everyday interactions, touching on Beyonce, blondness, skin lightening, and the inherent tensions in her own interracial marriage. Rankin opens a literary window into the Black experience. Memorial Drive, A Daughter's Memoir by Natasha Trethewey. Echo, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers. In her memoir, former U.S. Poet Laureate Trethewey confronts the horror of her mother's murder through finely honed, harrowing memories, dreams, visions, and musings. She writes, quote, "To survive trauma, one must be able to tell a story about it." And that's exactly what she does in this lyrical, courageous, and resounding remembrance. And let us now celebrate the winner of the Carnegie Medal for Nonfiction. Fathoms, The World in the Whale by Rebecca Giggs, published by Simon & Schuster. Rebecca Giggs is an award-winning writer from Perth, Australia. Her work has appeared in Granta, The Atlantic, The New York Times Magazine, Best Australian Essays, and Best Australian Science Writing. Fathoms, The World in the Whale is Rebecca's first book, a work of ravishing and brilliant poetic science writing. Giggs celebrates the wonders of whales and our ancient and persistent whale awe in stunning contrast to a delving illumination of the history of whale hunting, the endangerment of whale species, the 1970s Save the Whales movement, and all that threaten whales today, from pollution, including the oceanic plastic plague, to global warming and mass extinction. The Wall Street Journal writes, "Her prose, like the oceans in which her subjects roam, is immersive. Her sentences submerge us in a sea of sensations." The Economist describes Fathoms as brilliantly full of wonder as it spans eons of vast amounts of space, from the bottom of the ocean to the far reaches of the solar system. In a starred review, Booklist observes, "There is much to marvel at here. The bounty of a whale fall as a descending whale carcass feeds countless ocean creatures. Whale mother's milk is pink. Whales sequester more carbon than trees." Deeply researched and deeply felt, Giggs' intricate investigation, beautifully revelatory and haunting, urges us to save the whales once again, and the oceans, and ourselves. Here to accept the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction is Rebecca Giggs.
Late in 2020, I wrote a piece about listening to birds during the COVID-19 lockdowns. It seemed to me that many more of my neighbours were paying attention to bird life and to bird sounds, and that the significance that was being placed on those sounds had shifted in some way in response to the crisis. The reasons why birdsong mattered to people were not as had been the case before. What we hear when we listen to nature and what we go to nature to receive changes. There was, of course, something really heartening about the clarity with which birds could be heard now that traffic noise had abated and the hubbub of manufacturing was dialed back. The voices of birds came into the foreground, and bioacousticians were of the opinion that because birds were able to hear one another over far longer distances, they were chorusing with further flung counterparts, those far-off birds that had before now been drowned out by the mechanical sound that was rising off motorways or out of regions of industry. So each bird's awareness of other birds was expanded. The voices of potential companions, of mates, of adversaries, whole flocks, were being heard in distant trees and on telegraph wires over further horizons. What peace there was to be had for the human listener, taking note of birdsong, drew from this recovery narrative of nature. An idea of nature that had been left alone, was heedful only of itself, was recuperating. But bird calls also offered us a way to get out of our own heads, to gain insight into an overlooked world that was still nestled into the human world. A bird's eye perspective through which we might view our own troubles as somehow fleeting, limited, and small. One thing that we wanted from birdsong that season was a trapdoor, a mental escape from the emergency of the moment. Animals aren't voiceless, but we grant different kinds of legibility to the noises that they make, according to whether we see them as being social beings, as creatures with an inner life, or if we view them merely as a kind of background noise, white noise. In researching Fathoms, my book which the ALA have awarded this year's Carnegie Medal for Nonfiction, I learned that though whales have always had a really vast repertoire of sounds, people didn't grow enchanted with what we now call whale songs, really until whales were on the threshold of disappearance, their species having been hunted into near oblivion. The original intrigue of whale songs was simply that they were becoming harder to hear, being less commonplace in the sea. This might have been the first time that we considered that it would be possible to hear a global extinction taking place. Today, many whale populations have rebounded, thankfully, but whale voices are changing. Since the 1960s, the sounds of blue whales have downshifted the equivalent of 3 white notes on a piano. And they've also grown quieter, as well as deepening in pitch. This has happened with fin whales, with pygmy blue whale populations as well. Their voices have deepened and they've softened. Scientists think this may have something to do, or at least one explanation is, that seawater having become slightly more acidic as a result of global warming is more conducive to the carriage of sound waves. So the whales don't need to expend as much energy by being loud in this new sea that we have created. That being said, as the austral summers become longer and hotter, and the sound of breaking ice also grows louder, whales are having to shout once more over that season. They're having to alter their voices in places where humans very rarely go, where there's no ships, or hardly any ships, basically because of changing conditions on the planet. Sometimes when I was writing Fathoms, I would stream the audio from a hydrophone on the seafloor to block out the background sound of the street or clamour in a cafe that I was working in. It was like being in a bubble or a bathysphere underwater. And I thought a lot about silence when I was writing this book. And I thought about how what we call silence is so often the solace of nature. It's the moments passing that fills with the sound of the breeze in the grass or falling snow. It's the flutter in the hedge or the droning of insects. Where you are right now, you might be able to hear an animal if you take a pause. Only moments ago, I heard magpies outside. Or you may be able to hear a mosquito or the dog's claws on the paving. Silence is full of natural sound, at least the silence that refreshes us is. And I think that we need that to be able to tune into our own voices, to hear our own daring, our courage, our ambitions, and our inconsistencies as well. Maybe too, like the birds during the lockdowns, we will discover that we are more legion than we knew when what was between us was just noise. It has been a golden privilege to learn that my writing resonates with readers in the US, and to see Fathoms, which is my debut book, list alongside such titans of literature and lodestars in my own personal artistic universe as Claudia Rankine and Natasha Trethewey, who are this year's shortlistees in Nonfiction. I want to thank the people who helped me realise this book, in particular Emily Simonson, my wonderful clear-eyed editor, and Ante Pierce, my publicist at Simon & Schuster, and my agent Bonnie Nadell. And beyond the personal significance of this award, I also want to take the time to thank the ALA for reminding us that libraries are an important place to hear one another, particularly through crisis. Speaking to you today from Melbourne, from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, I am so very grateful for this award. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and congratulations. Now it is time to honor the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. Let us first praise the two finalists. A Burning by Megha Mujumdar, published by Alfred A. Knopf, a division of Penguin Random House, LLC. After witnessing a gruesome train station attack during her walk home to the slums, Javan responds to a Facebook post. Days later, she has been beaten, jailed, and accused of terrorism. Mujumdar's debut serves as a barometer measuring the seeming triviality of human life and the fragility of human connections. Homeland Elegies by Ayad Akhtar, published by Little, Brown and Company, a division of Hachette Book Group, Inc. Akhtar confronts race, money, family, politics, and sexuality in this bold, memoiristic novel about a young Pakistani American before and after 9/11. Money and the debasement of other values is a defining element of narrator Ayad's relationship with writing and his father, while the country's crude racism prods both men to question whether America can ever truly be their home. The winner of the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction is James McBride for Deacon King Kong, published by Riverhead Books, an imprint of Penguin Random House, LLC. James McBride is the author of the National Book Award winning The Good Lord Bird, which was adapted for a Showtime series starring Ethan Hawke and Daveed Diggs. McBride is also the author of The Color of Water, Song Yet Sung, 5 Carat Soul, and Miracle at St. Anna, which was adapted into a film by Spike Lee with a screenplay written by McBride. James is also the author of Kill 'Em and Leave, a biography of James Brown. In addition to winning the Carnegie Medal, Deacon King Kong received the Anisfield Wolf Award and the Gotham Book Prize, and it was an Oprah Book Club selection. McBride is a distinguished writer-in-residence at New York University and was awarded a National Humanities Medal by President Obama for, quote, humanizing the complexities of discussing race in America. Deacon King Kong portrays a 1969 Brooklyn neighborhood through its outsiders as McBride creates tragedies, humor, plot twists, and cultural and generational clashes. When the titular deacon's sport coat, the least likely of heroes, shoots a 19-year-old drug dealer, everyone assumes that the deacon's days of freedom are numbered. But all is not as it seems. Quote, a mystery story, a crime novel, an urban farce, a sociological portrait of late 1960s Brooklyn, McBride's novel contains multitudes. He conducts his antic symphony with deep feeling, never losing sight of the suffering and inequity within the merriment, says the New York Times, as it named Deacon King Kong a top 10 book of 2020. Quote, boisterous, imaginative, and tender, writes Entertainment Weekly. And Booklist starred review reads, in part, barely coherent, cuffy sport coat lambkin rehearses for arguments with his late wife Hetty and drinks to clear his thoughts, running off to the boiler room to down some King Kong, a local white lightning, usually with his best friend, Hot Sausage. When he shoots and wounds Deems Clemens, the boy he coached in baseball who has become a drug dealer at 19, the deacon begins to reckon with his past and seeks to bring some stability to his community. A sense of shared struggle emerges as diverse characters develop emotionally while navigating a world that's changing for better and for worse. McBride's Neighborhood Saga ultimately sets a new standard for multi-dimensional fiction about people of color. Correct. Congratulations, James.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very honored and happy that to receive this award, and it's been a wonderful event for me personally and professionally. I I'm not that good at talking about my books, but this book was in my heart for many years, and it talks about many characters that I've known all my life, and I'm very grateful that they found a home in my heart and in my my books. The Brooklyn that is in this book no longer exists, and the world that this book reflects is gone. In its place is a new world, a new Brooklyn, a new New York. And my hope is that now, as the pandemic starts to recede, it's not fully gone yet, but as we start to beat it back, that we look forward to learning how to live with each other in ways that we perhaps didn't know how to do before. Like most people, I've watched the events of the last few years unfold with just enormous concern. And I suppose that as librarians and as booksellers and as authors and writers and people who love the written word, our job is to try to make sure that people understand what the word freedom really means. And in this world, and the characters in this book are really oppressed people, but yet they have a freedom that is given to them by God and by the laws of this country, some of the laws. And the reason why they work for you and for me, I hope for you anyway, is because the important people in this book, Sport Coat, Hetty, even Deems, these characters are arcing toward freedom. And when you move toward freedom, you don't even know you're going that way. You're just moving to express yourself in a way. That's what identity is, really. Identity is the movement towards freedom, to the ability to say I am, and whatever I am is, that's important. So in many ways, this book is powered by people who are speaking to who they want to be, or deem to be, or aspire to be, and knowing that if they don't get to that aspiration in this life, certainly it awaits them in the next. I hope that this award will inspire young writers to do what I did, which is to find your own story right where you are. And I hope it inspires the soothsayers of literary wisdom in our industry to give young writers the chance, the opportunity to push into stories like this. Just because a person is oppressed doesn't mean they're a good writer. And just because a person has a difficult life doesn't mean their story is worth telling. Stories are only worth telling when they show people how to love. And you can't love until you know who you are. And so my own search for identity has rolled out and become a career. But at bottom, all of my books move to the business of what we need to do to get along. It's not hard to love someone. Hate takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of power. And the hate mongers who have been running things in our country until the last election have burnt up a lot of really bad energy that will, at some point, burn itself out. and the fire that will burn that, the water that will douse that, and the fuel that it will allow it to burn itself out, that kind of hate, is captured in books that we read. So keep that in mind. Keep up the good work. Keep the written word alive. Keep books alive. Force your children, if necessary, to read. And thank you for giving me this award. I appreciate it. And, because of you, I'm going to buy a new car. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And once again, congratulations. Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate the 2021 Carnegie winners. Thank you to everyone at Booklist, RUSA, and ALA who made this possible. Thank you to our partners and sponsors for their essential support. We are very grateful. A new Carnegie committee is hard at work. Here they are. And finally, watch for the next Carnegie Long List in October. The 6 finalists will be announced live at LibLearnX, the library learning experience, in January 2022 in San Antonio. And we will gather to celebrate next year's Carnegie Medal winners at ALA Annual in June 2022 in Washington, D.C. Thank you all once more for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next year.